And we'll just jump into a brief set aside prayer. So, dear God, dear universe, dear source, please help us to set aside everything that we think we know about ourselves, about the book that we're about to read, and about you, God, so that we may have a new experience tonight. Please allow us to see the truth. Amen. When you're ready, you can open your eyes if they're closed and come back to the room. And so we're going to be jumping into a return to love tonight. I'm sure most of you guys know that. Thank you all for being here. It doesn't happen without people showing up, so I really appreciate that. I love doing stuff like this. And so just a quick backstory before we jump in. Basically, I think everybody here knows that I got sober back in 2014. And really one of the main things that helped me to recover was when I finally went through the Alcoholics Anonymous textbook. And I had read that book many times by myself, and I thought it was a good book, but it didn't nearly have the impact that it had on my life until someone took me through the book and showed me what they were taught. And so after that, I kind of really became, I wouldn't say obsessed, but I got really into like this idea of book studies. Like, wow, I read a book and I get a lot out of it, but like, what if other people get out of it? And just kind of this idea of like bringing people together to go through a book that can be really impactful and just kind of sharing different interpretations of it. And again, that came from my experience of going through the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And so obviously, it's book studies have been around forever, but just because of, my experience with that, I like to do it with other books. So a lot of times, I bring people through the Alcoholics Anonymous book. And then when we're done going through that book, it's kind of like, what's next? And it's like, I don't like to just kind of dump people off. I'm like, well, if you want to continue to work together, we can read, a spiritual text or, continue to talk once a week, or their options. And thankfully most people, Shane being one of them, who is in the top corner on my screen there in this car, he and I went through a good chunk of this book together. Michelle, who's here and is my fiance, we went through a good chunk of this book together. And so A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson had a profound impact on my life. It's probably the second big spiritual book that kind of fell into my lap after Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got really into this book, and I practiced the things that it said in here. And I actually met the author 2 different times. And so it's very near and dear to my heart. I actually met her, and she signed the front of my book. So it's a cool story, and she's a really awesome lady. Marianne's actually just recently was trying to run for president. So sort of this, spiritual psychology, metaphysical teacher and best-selling author. That's just a really powerful and loving lady. So just a little bit of a backstory there. Tonight, we're going to just jump into the introduction. So hopefully you have a book. If you don't have a book, I'm going to attempt to share the online version of the book on my screen. And I'm probably going to ask for feedback from you guys as to how that looks. I'm hoping it looks decent, because I don't think everybody has a book, but I'm not sure about that. So let me flip to the intro. So we're not going to read the acknowledgments. We're not going to read the preface. We're going to jump right into the introduction. And there's a lot of different additions to this book, so I'm not sure what it looks like on your version, but on my page, it just says introduction, and it starts by saying when we were born. And there's really not much of a page number on mine. I think it's still in like the Roman numeral section. So again, on my page, it looks like this. Is there anyone, if everyone has a book, I don't need to share the screen, but let me unmute everybody for a second. Does anyone not have a book? Just raise a hand or say aye. Aaron doesn't. Kathy doesn't. What's up, Kev?
Hey, how are you?
Good, man. Do you have a book by chance or no?
Yes.
You do? Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So for Kathy and Aaron, I'm going to pop up the book and just kind of let me know how it looks on your screen. Where are we at? Share screen. Desktop. So now you guys can see my screen. And all right. So what does that look like? Can you see it at all? The book, Kathy or Aaron?
Yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yep, that's clear.
It's perfect.
Sweet. So if it looks great, don't do anything. But if you're on a phone, I was thinking it might look better if you flip your phone kind of long ways. So if you can just kind of experiment with that. But I'll keep this open then, and so you guys can follow along. And I think what we'll probably do is go through a page and then stop, and I'll share anything that resonated with me or any kind of interpretations that I have. And then I'll, ask for a show of hands or for you guys to just kind of speak up. So before I start reading, let me just see, does anyone have any questions? Are we good to jump in? Everyone know where we're at? Thumbs up.
Good.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to mute everybody again. And then so if you want to share or just kind of speak out, just make sure you unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. So muting everybody. I'm going to share the screen again. Share, and we're on. So introduction. So again, just so you guys know, I'm sharing the screen right now and it shows almost like 2 pages on the screen, but in the book, there's only about 2 paragraphs on the first page, or 2.5. So it's not going to align perfectly. So just know when I stop, I'm kind of following along in my book, basically. All right. So it says, when we were born, we were programmed perfectly. We had a natural tendency to focus on love. Our imaginations were creative and flourishing, and we knew how to use them. We were connected to a world much richer than the one we connect to now, a world full of enchantment and a sense of the miraculous. So what happened? Why is it that we reached a certain age, looked around, and the enchantment was gone? Because we were taught to focus elsewhere. We were taught to think unnaturally. I'm going to keep going and just finish this. We were taught a very bad philosophy, a way of looking at the world that contradicts who we are. So it's going to go on to elaborate with this, but like I said, I want to stop, and I don't like to read too much because it can be a lot to digest. Does anyone have anything that really sticks out to them or that they want to jump in on? Again, just kind of raise your hand or unmute yourself. I don't see any hands raised. I don't see anyone trying to talk, so I think we're good. Basically, what I got out of that is pretty clear to me, is that they say when we're born, we come out perfect. And I certainly see that with my children. It's like you see kids and they're just so happy. It's not like they have money or they have these, crazy jobs, or they have a girlfriend or a husband or a wife or kids. They just come out and they're programmed to be happy and to be loving. They talk about it's like a world full of enchantment, and most of you can see that, I'm sure, when you've seen children. I have 2 young boys, and so I see it all the time. But then something happens to us, right? It's like all of a sudden the enchantment's just like gone. It's like kind of like we grow up, or we get sort of lost. And basically what this author is saying is that we're taught to do that. We're taught to think unnaturally. It says we're taught a very bad philosophy and a way of looking at the world that contradicts who we are. All right, so I'm going to share the screen again. We'll keep going. So we were taught to think thoughts like competition, struggle, sickness, finite resources, limitation, guilt, bad, death, scarcity, and loss. We began to think these things, and so we began to know them. We were taught that things like grades, being good enough, money, and doing things the right way are more important than love. We were taught that we're separate from other people, that we have to compete to get ahead, that we're not quite good enough the way we are. We were taught to see the world the way that others had come to see it. It's as though as soon as we got here, we were given a sleeping pill. The thinking of the world, which is not based on love, began pounding in our ears the moment we hit shore. Let's see where we're at. Cool. Love is what we were born with. Fear is what we have learned here. The spiritual journey is the relinquishment or unlearning of fear and the acceptance of love back into our hearts. Love is the essential existential fact. It is our ultimate reality and our purpose here on earth. To be consciously aware of it, to experience love in ourselves and others, is the meaning of life. Meaning doesn't lie in things. Meaning lies in us. When we attach value to things that aren't love, the money, the car, the house, the prestige, we are loving things that can't love us back. We are searching for meaning in the meaningless. Money of itself means nothing. Material things of themselves mean nothing. It's not that they're bad, it's that they're nothing. We came here to co create with God by extending love. Life spent with any other purpose in mind is meaningless, contrary to our nature, and ultimately painful. It's as though we've been lost in a dark, parallel universe where things are loved more than people. We overvalue what we perceive with our physical senses and undervalue what we know to be true in our hearts. I think that's a good spot to pause. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just kind of review because we read a lot there. If you guys want to just kind of review and if you had anything that really resonates, again, this is very laid back, so I don't need some sort of genius or mind blowing interpretation. But even if you just want to raise your hand and say, man, that hit me hard. Like I feel that. I can relate to that, or I can relate to that, and this is how. Again, I don't want you to think you have to share some profound thing. It's just a laid back kind of conversation about what we're reading. So I can definitely relate to that. A lot of the stuff there that we read, and sort of the first paragraph that I picked up, it says that we're taught to really focus on things like competition, that there's finite resources, the death and loss, and really this kind of being good enough. And so those are definitely things that I felt throughout my life. And that, ultimately one of the big reasons that I kind of turned to my addiction was because I felt different from other people. I felt like I was not good enough. And I just felt like the world was kind of a harsh place. I remember being pretty darn happy as a baby. I remember feeling really like loved by my mother and certain family members and very close to my siblings. But when I went out into the world and like into schools and different places, I didn't have the best experience. My perception was that the world was like kind of a harsh place. Experienced a lot of bullying and kind of shut down, and really just interpreted that to mean that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough. And so, life became pretty hard until I finally kind of hit a bottom and, decided to change that. So I think they make a lot of good points in there. I do think that kind of as a society, we're taught to focus on things. And she kind of goes on to say that money or things or cars aren't bad. It's just when we give them more attention or more love than people, it's kind of twisted and messed up. And that's the way that I perceive that, and can even fall into that at times. Technology or phone or computer or different things that we can kind of almost like have as like idols or just really worship. And then we ignore the people that are closest to them or give them an attitude. Again, just kind of speaking for myself and how it relates to me. Anyone have anything they wanted to share? Cool. Shane, you're smiling. You got any goods, Shane?
Um, yeah, I'll say something.
Cool.
Uh, so yeah, it's. I mean, it's been a little bit since I read this book, but it's just crazy. Just reading out hits me again. It's like you started with. We're born perfect, and it took me a while to like Joe said, I'm Joe's my sponsor, and I went to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then furthering my spirituality, like Joe taught me to do, reading things and having that spiritual awakening. I had a lot of trouble before. I had a lot of resentment, a lot of hate, and that was replaced with love. And it, like Joe was talking about, like it says at the top of this page here, you know we're born perfect, and then we start to be conditioned by our parents, by society, by religion, by politics, what have you, when we go to school, and we start to think all these different things, and love gets away from us. And I know I was one of them. And then that second paragraph on this page where it says fear is what we've learned here. I was full of fear, for a long time. And I know when I started reading this book, by that point I had a transformation in my mind and stuff, and my thoughts. And like I have much love today. Like it says, love is our essential existential fact. Like it is the ultimate reality and our purpose on earth. Like I have tremendous love today. Like replacing that fear with love, replacing the hate, replacing it all with love was a big thing for me. And like in my journey, and like I've I've grown these past few years, and I have love for, I don't wish ill will on like anybody, where that might not have been the case going back a few years ago. Um, and then the bottom there talking about material things, like they're meaningless. Like I don't think I was a very materialistic person before, um, having that spiritual awakening, but like, I see it more today. Like you see it with a lot of people, this in society today. Like there's a lot of like focus on money and materialism, and really like at the end of the day, it's meaningless. Like she says, I mean, I can't agree with it more. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely a good like reminder for me to to appreciate what I have. I have a very loving family, and it's easy to get lost and to forget that that's right there. And that line on my book, it's like page XX. It basically says that to experience love in ourselves and others is the meaning of life. It's a pretty, it's a pretty big statement, basically saying the meaning of life is to experience love in your life, whether that be for family or friends or whatever it might be. But again, it's just a good reminder, as it can be easy to get caught up in other things. All right. If no one has anything, we can keep reading. Share the screen again. All right. So we're at the bottom here. So love isn't seen with the physical eyes or heard with physical ears. The physical senses can't perceive it. It's perceived through, I screw that up. It's perceived through another kind of vision. Metaphysicians call it the third eye. Esoteric Christians call it the vision of the Holy Spirit, and others call it the higher self. Regardless of what it's called, love requires a different kind of seeing than we're used to, a different kind of knowing or thinking. Love is the intuitive knowledge of our hearts. It's a world beyond it's a world beyond that we all secretly long for. An ancient memory of this love haunts all of us all the time and beckons us to return. Love isn't material, it's energy. It's the feeling in a room, a situation, a person. Money can't buy it, sex doesn't guarantee it. It has nothing at all to do with the physical world, but it can be expressed nonetheless. We can experience it as kindness, giving, mercy, compassion, peace, joy, acceptance, non-judgment, joining, and intimacy. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So that's the end of the page in the book. I'm trying to keep track of the ebook and my book here in person. So I love when like spiritual authors are able to point out sort of the same truth in different traditions or religions. I think it might be offensive at times to people that really believe that their religion is the only way. So I apologize if that is offensive. That's definitely not what I mean to do. Just for me, I do believe that there are, many truths spoken in different ways. And so I just think it's cool that, like she said, like, she mentions the third eye and how Christians will call it the Holy Spirit, and some people call it the higher self. And basically is saying that love is kind of this miraculous thing, right? It's like we can express it. Like when my children come running at me, I can feel love, but like I can't like take love and like put it in a cup. It's this like weird thing that can like be expressed, and it's almost kind of like a bridge to heaven. I feel like it's this sort of gift that we're given that we can like everybody can feel it, but it's not always that easy to explain it. And I would argue that the word God is kind of similar, that that we can feel God. We kind of feel that presence, but if you ask someone to like explain God, it's typically not that easy. And so love is again, sort of this gift that we have. She calls it this, like, it's like a world beyond. And what she's kind of hinting at is that, at least I think she's saying that love is like a world beyond that we all secretly long for. And I think what she's kind of hinting at is that heaven is basically nothing but love. And that's, if you believe in heaven or you believe in eternal life or whatever you believe in, I believe that before we came here, we were in some version of heaven or with God or source, and we were in love, pure love. And I believe that after we're here, we go back to that. And then who knows, maybe we come back to another life, maybe we stay in heaven with our loved ones. I have no idea. But just kind of, for me, I do believe that when we are with God or higher power, when we pass, we go back to a world beyond, as in quotations of the books, that is just nothing but love, which is a pretty nice thought, right? So I don't think I have anything else. Anybody want to jump in? We got anything to share? Aaron, you're on mute. Give me 1 second. All right, you're good.
Joe?
1 second. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, no, it's like, it's, like you mentioned with kids, they love people unconditionally. And like, sometime along the way in our life, it's like we forget what that love is. And then like, as you're an adult and you have a child, it like comes back, because once you see your child come into this world, you don't know what true unconditional love is. And it's something you haven't, for me, it was like something I haven't felt since I was a kid. You know what I mean? Once you see that child born, and like when your kids run at you and stuff, like you were saying, it's just something that you just feel. It's nothing that's material or anything like that. That's all I got basically. But I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, man, I agree. Go ahead, Nan.
I was thinking the word energy really jumped out at me. It is an energy, and you can feel it. Like you said, it's not tangible, something that you can bottle up or put someplace or save. But you can even feel it when you think of like love being also, kindness and goodwill and those kinds of qualities. I'm sure you've all experienced it. You can walk into an office or walk in someplace for an appointment, and you can feel that energy if there is a sense of harmony and people trying to do, good for other people. There is kind of an energy there. Something really struck me when, was it Aaron that was talking before? The fact that used to always strike me about the pure love of a child. When you're having a bad day and everything is going really wrong, and you have a very young child, and you might have that child in the high chair, and you really are on the grumpy side, and maybe you're really even a little impatient, and they just smile up at you and, wait for the next mouthful of food and give you a big smile. And man, that puts you right in your place and reminds you what it's all about, because that is a pure love, not dependent on anything else, even your mood.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. I agree. It was awesome. Frank made it. Hey, Francis. What's up, buddy? All right. Michelle.
All right. Well, since Nan was touching on the topic of children and Aaron and you, I have to share what Noah did last night. He was in the bath, and I was having kind of an off day, and all of a sudden he's out of nowhere. He just stands up in the bath. Noah is my 1.5-year-old, and he just stands up in the bath and he goes, "Hug." And I was like, "What'd you say?" And he goes, "Hug." And he just wanted to give me a hug. And then he looked at me and he just gave me a kiss, and then sat down and resumed his bath out of nowhere. And it's amazing, because you can just feel the unconditional love from children just emanating, even on your worst days. That's all I've got.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Shane.
Awesome. Gotta love the kiddos. All right. Going back to the screen. Let's see. So I think I stopped at intimacy, right? Cool. All right. So for anyone, Francis, you just joined, hopefully you can see my screen. We're third paragraph, or I guess paragraph. It says, fear is our shared lovelessness. Fear is our shared lovelessness, our individual and collective hells. It's a world that seems to press on us from within and without, giving constant false testimony to the meaninglessness of love. When fear is expressed, we recognize it as anger, abuse, disease, pain, greed, addiction, selfishness, obsession, corruption, violence, and war. Love is within us. It cannot be destroyed, but can only be hidden. The world we knew as children is buried within our minds. I once read a delightful book called The Mists of Avalon. The Mists of Avalon are a mythical allusion to the tales of King Arthur. Avalon is a magical island that is hidden behind huge, impenetrable mists. Unless the mists part, there is no way to navigate your way to the island. But unless you believe the island is there, the mists won't part. Avalon symbolizes a world beyond the world we see with our physical senses, with our physical eyes. It represents a miraculous sense of things, the enchanted realm that we knew as children. Our childlike self is the deepest level of our being. It is who we really are, and what is real doesn't go away. The truth doesn't stop being the truth just because we're not looking at it. Love merely becomes clouded over or surrounded by mental mists. Avalon is the world we knew when we were still connected to our softness, our innocence, our spirit. It's actually the same world we see now, but informed by love, interpreted gently with hope and faith and a sense of wonder. It's easily retrieved because perception is a choice. The mists part when we believe that Avalon is behind them. And that's what a miracle is, a parting of the mists, a shift in perception, a return to love. All right, stop sharing. Anyone have anything they want to jump in on right away? It's good stuff. Kathy, I knew you were going to jump in on Avalon, Kath.
No, I mean, for me, it's not the Mists of Avalon, it's the Polar Express.
Ah,
It's, like that the children can hear the bell. And as you get older, you lose that sense of mystery and that sense of like wonder and that, everything is fabulous, and you stop hearing the bell.
right.
And I think that as adults, we get to find that bell again. Because I think that's the whole thing, is to be able to hear the bell.
Yes. Amen. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I really like that analogy a lot. And, just to kind of piggyback off what Kathy said in the reading, saying, and it's not that when we don't hear the bell, it's not that it's not there anymore. It's always there. It's just kind of clouded over. And so in pretty much every spiritual book you read, they often say that kind of like happiness or joy or peace is never a matter of adding anything to your life. It's a matter of subtracting away the fear or the clouds or the judgment, because underneath, basically, we're still that childlike self that knows love, that came from love. And so it's not that we need to add anything onto us, like a better job or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or any of these things. It's that we need to subtract or remove sort of these things we've learned, such as fear. They give you a bunch of ways that kind of fear can manifest, anger, abuse, disease, pain, addiction, selfishness, obsession. And that once we can start to kind of scrub or peel away at those things, that we always find love underneath. And of course, there's many ways to say that: joy or peace, or like Nan said, kindness. And so that's another kind of basic thing to put out. It's pretty common in spiritual texts, and she'll use it a lot here. But just to make it very simple, she kind of will just say that there's only really two things: there's love and there's fear. And there's lots of different ways that both of those manifest. So like I was just saying, love can manifest as kindness or compassion or joy, and fear manifests in many different ways. So just to kind of dumb it down and keep it simple, she kind of just says, is that love or is that fear? The last thing that I will say is that she kind of ends that introduction by saying that's what a miracle is. A miracle is a parting of the mists. It's a shift in perception. It's a return to love. So she says that, I believe, many times in this book. And I love that definition of a miracle, because another kind of thing that society can kind of teach us is that a miracle is something like walking on water or turning water into wine, or these sort of things that nobody can achieve. Like a miracle is outside of any of our reach unless we're like Jesus, or some godly like figure. And she gives the example that a miracle is a shift in perception. So if all of a sudden you're judging somebody at work and you've been judging them for, days or weeks or months or years, and then all of a sudden you see them differently, or maybe you learn that their child is in addiction or their husband is sick, and you all of a sudden, whatever it is, you kind of see them in this different light where you're like, oh my gosh, I see them differently now. That's a miracle. It's a shift in perception from the way you were thinking to a new way, or another way to say it is a return to love. So I really dig that, because again, I think miracle, people don't like to use it because they think it's just this like crazy thing that doesn't really happen. But the idea of saying that it's a shift in perception is just something that's appealing to me, something that we can all use. Anyone got anything before we keep on reading? I see Sue. Hey.
Hello, guys. I can't see everybody else. I don't know why, but hope everybody's doing well tonight. So I had a lot of things to add, but I couldn't figure out my computer, believe it or not. I couldn't get the update going. But I was just thinking like about fear and how things can manifest in our life, and how sometimes we judge others, but we really have to, sort of like what she says in the book, have kindness, be giving, have some compassion and acceptance, and don't be like, have non-judgment towards people, because you don't know where maybe that fear came from or something like that. Like, for example, I might be very, can you guys hear me, right? You guys
Yep.
can hear me, right? Okay. I might be very fearful of the water, and I'm really like, I made sure that my kids went and they got swimming lessons right away and all that good stuff. And for me, that fear came from almost drowning at 11, because someone assumed, at the high school where I went for lessons, they assumed that I knew how to swim at age 11, and I didn't. So I went, like a kid, not afraid, jumped into the 9-foot or 10-foot, water, and almost drowned. And therefore, that's where my fear comes from,
Yep.
But, so I guess when, people, when you're trying to express that to people, sometimes it's difficult to express that, but just know that like they're coming from a place of love.
Definitely. Thanks, Sue. Jumping in, Mom? Beth is Mom.
Yeah. I actually love that last line. That a miracle is a parting of the mist, a shift in perception, a return to love. I think one of the main reasons that I love that is when to go back to recovery, when you and Josh were in such bad states. I actually have something that Nanny, my mom, who's also on here, had given to me, which was called the Miracle Prayer. And I used to pray it all the time. But when I prayed it for many, many times a day, I was thinking that a miracle was something else. And then over time, even as going through the process, you start to realize that like you need to look at things differently. But then when I saw what I think I witnessed a miracle in you, or I witnessed a miracle in Josh, is it's almost like a person that you see becomes transformed. And like when you're around them, they're just different. And it could be, it's like, it's almost doesn't need to be unspoken. It's a change in the feel of them. It's a change in the energy. It's a change in how they look. And what I've come to realize is that that's a miracle. It's like something happens that shifts in you, that causes you to see yourself and the world and everything in a different way. And I think that definition is just an awesome way to look at it. Because it's not like magic. It's but and who knows what happens, so maybe that is part of the magic. But I think that's, to me, an amazing definition, like a amazing sentence to actually live by, honestly, and just think about a lot.
Right. I agree. Very good. All right. So before we'll read a little bit more. It's 8:45. Before we move on, something that Sue said kind of brought this up for me, and I just wanted to clear it up because I think it's something that confused me when I was first reading this book and getting into some of this stuff. And basically, it'll kind of make it seem like fear is unreasonable or bad in every single circumstance. And that's not what they're aiming for in this book. The book is really speaking more so to our internal space. So, for instance, if somebody comes at you with a gun or a tiger's coming at you, you're going to feel, a fear response, and that response is going to, give you adrenaline, and it's a biological response that keeps us alive. So not to say that, we should never have fear. Fear is here, and there's times where it saves our butts. But the issue is where, we carry fear into, our cubicles or these situations where it's not necessary to have fear, right? And that's kind of what has happened. We're typically pretty safe in houses and the way we live. And so we've gone from having a lot of these external threats to not really having them. And so we get fearful about kind of silly things now. And so I just wanted to clear that up, that it's not that we're never supposed to have fear as like a biological response, but more so she's talking about, these sort of long-term versions of internal fear that turn into things like disease or pain or greed or addiction or selfishness, things of that nature. All right, so we're going to jump into chapter 1, which is called The Darkness. So we'll read a few more pages and then see if anyone wants to share, and we'll wrap it up. We got 15 minutes left. So share the screen again. Here we go. Principles. All right, so we'll just read the quote at the top. So there is no place for hell in a world whose loveliness can yet be so intense and so inclusive. It is but a step from there to heaven. And another quote, so the journey into darkness has been long and cruel, and you have gone deep into it. So what happened to my generation is that we never grew up. The problem isn't that we're lost or apathetic, narcissistic or materialistic. The problem is we're terrified. A lot of us know we have what it takes, the looks, the education, the talent, the credentials, but in certain areas we're paralyzed. We're not being stopped by something on the outside, but by something on the inside. Our oppression is internal. The government isn't holding us back, or hunger or poverty. We're not afraid we'll get sent to Siberia. We're just afraid, period. Our fear is free floating. We're afraid this isn't the right relationship, or we're afraid it is. We're afraid they weren't like us, or we're afraid they will. We're afraid of failure, or we're afraid of success. We're afraid of dying young, or we're afraid of growing old. We're more afraid of life. Oop, I'm not following along too good here. Sorry, guys. We're more afraid of life. Where are we at on this here? Right here. We're more afraid of life than we are of death. You'd think we'd have some compassion for ourselves, bound up and emotional the way we are. But we don't. We're just disgusted with ourselves because we think we should be better by now. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that people don't have as much fear as we do, which only makes us more afraid. Maybe they know something we don't. Maybe we're missing a chromosome. It's become popular these days to blame practically everything on our parents. We figure it's because of them that our self-esteem is so low. If only they'd been different, we'd be brimming with self-love. But if you take a close look at how our parents treated us, whatever abuse they gave us was often mild compared to the way we abuse ourselves today. It's true that your mother might have said repeatedly, "You'll never be able to do that, dear." But now you say to yourself, "You're a jerk. You never do it right. You blew it. I hate you." They might have been mean, but we are vicious. Our generation has slipped into a barely camouflaged vortex of self-loathing, and we're always, even desperately seeking a way out through growth or through escape. maybe this degree will do it, or this job, this seminar, this therapist, this relationship, this diet, or this project. But too often the medicine falls short of a cure, and the chains just keep getting thicker and tighter. The same soap operas develop with different people in different cities. We begin to realize that we ourselves are somehow the problem, but we don't know what to do about it. We're not powerful enough to overrule ourselves. We sabotage, abort everything, our careers, our relationships, even our children. We drink, we do drugs, we control, we obsess, we codepend, we overeat, we hide, we attack. The form of the dysfunction is irrelevant. We can find a lot of different ways to express how much we hate ourselves. Cool, that ends at the same spot. So I'll stop it there. Again, if anyone wants to relate to that, feel free to throw their hand up. She's getting into the darkness right now, which isn't always people's favorite to share on, because it's dark, right? So she's of course sharing things that she felt, but she is wise in that she knows other people must be feeling it too. She knows that she's not the only one feeling this way. And so she's just, again, kind of going on to say that the problem isn't the parents or the job or this or that. The problem is that there's this emptiness inside. There's this sort of missing piece that you feel like is in your heart or you're in your soul. And so when you feel that way, people will do lots of different things. They might obsess about going to the gym or about, going to see their therapist every day as sort of an escape. So there's sort of these escapes that people deem to be like, okay. And then of course there's escapes that are very self-destructive, such as, codependency or overeating or addiction or alcoholism. And so she's kind of going on to say that everybody's doing this, whether it's, that glass of wine at the end of the night, or whether it's, again, like an obsession over the gym, that most of us aren't okay just kind of being. And it's really an interesting topic to kind of come up with what we're dealing with now, because a lot of the things that I think we use to keep us happy or to maybe distract us, that we kind of lean on, like the gym or like seeing our friends or these different things, are kind of taken away right now. And a lot of people are kind of freaking out. You'll hear people say they're going stir crazy, or they're kind of going nuts, or like freaking out, that they're really, really depressed. And so I think the message kind of is like, can you be okay? Can you be okay without those things? And so it can be challenging when we're used to having all of these things, but it's an interesting question to just kind of ask yourself. And she gets into a solution. I'm not going to try to sit here and pose a solution, just posing a question. But again, she's getting into the darkness. I can certainly relate to that in many different ways. Does anyone have anything they want to jump in or that they can relate to? Any darkness they want to shine light on? Go ahead, Nan.
I have to say this one really hit me between the eyes, because those of you who've been around me enough on a really hard day mentally, I've been known to say out loud, I really don't like myself. And I mean, this just is everything she's talking about right there. I'm going to be careful not to get to that point where I say that again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ka. I think you're on mute.
I think that those whole 2 pages really resound with me, because I think it was a realization that hit me when I was going through my transformational journey, that it was me that was the problem, and that I was afraid to be with myself. And I think that you need to come to a point, or you get to come to a point where you're comfortable with who you are, and you're okay with that. And it's not anybody around you. It's not your parents. It's not your friends. It's a discussion you have to have with yourself.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love hearing from both of you. That's funny you said that, Nan, because I definitely have heard you say that before. And it's so true. It's that really hits me hard too. Like you can kind of look to things like, oh, I was bullied or this or that happened, but really no one abuses us more than we do. Usually that's the case anyway. I can certainly relate to that. So that is powerful. Anyone want to jump in? Got a few minutes, so if no one wants to share, we can read another page or so and then wrap it up. Cool. Let's keep going. Share my screen again. Share desktop. I'm gonna get better at this. All right. So basically the last line on the page before said that we can find a lot of different ways to express how much we hate ourselves. Ouch. So there's many ways to express how much we dislike ourselves, but express it we will. Emotional energy has got to go somewhere, and self-loathing is a powerful emotion. Turned inward, it becomes our personal hells. Addiction, obsession, compulsion, depression, violent relationships, illness. Projected outward, it becomes our collective hells. Violence, war, crime, oppression, but it's all the same thing. Hell has many mansions too. I remember years ago having an image in my mind that frightened me terribly. I would see a sweet, innocent little girl in a perfect white organdy apron, pinned, screaming with her back against the wall. A vicious, hysterical woman was repeatedly stabbing her through the heart with a knife. I suspected that both characters were me, that they lived as psychic forces inside my mind. With every passing year, I grew more scared of that woman with the knife. She was active in my system. She was totally out of control, and I felt like she wanted to kill me. When I was most desperate, I looked for a lot of ways out of my personal hell. I read books about how our minds create our experience, how the brain is like a biocomputer that manufactures whatever we feed into it with our thoughts. Think success and you'll get it. Expect to fail and you will, I read. But no matter how much I worked at changing my thoughts, I kept going back to the painful ones. Temporary breakthroughs would occur. I would work on having a more positive attitude, get myself together and meet a new man or get a new job, but I would always revert to the patterns of self-betrayal. I'd eventually turn into a bitch with the man or screw up at the job. I would lose 10 pounds and then put them back on in 5 minutes, terrified how it felt to look beautiful. The only thing more frightening than not getting male attention was getting lots of it. The groove of sabotage ran deep and automatic. Sure, I could change my thoughts, but not permanently. And there's only one despair worse than God, I blew it. And that's God, I blew it again. My painful thoughts were my demons. Demons are insidious. Through various therapeutic techniques, I became very smart about my own neuroses, but that didn't necessarily exercise them. The garbage didn't go away, it just became more sophisticated. I used to tell a person what my weaknesses were, using such conscious language that they would think, well, obviously she knows what her patterns are, so she won't do that again. But oh yes, I would. Acknowledging my patterns was just a way of diverting someone's attention. Then I'd go into a rampage or other outrageous behavior so quickly and smoothly that no one, least of all myself, could do anything to stop me before I'd ruined a situation completely. I would say the exact words that would make the man leave or hit me or make someone fire me or worse. In those days, it never occurred to me to ask for a miracle. Let me see where I'm at in this book. Oh, I'm perfectly there. Cool. Let me see if that's a good spot to stop. All right, so I'm going to read right through to the end because it's only like another half a page before we get to the light. I hate to leave you guys in darkness, but I think that's what's going to happen. All right, so for one thing, I wouldn't have known what a miracle was. I put them in a pseudo-mystical religious garbage category, like we talked about. I didn't know until reading A Course in Miracles that a miracle is a reasonable thing to ask for. I didn't know that a miracle is just a shift in perception. I once attended a 12-step meeting where people were asking God to take away their desire to drink. I had never gone overboard with any one particular dysfunctional behavior. It wasn't drinking or drugs that was doing me in. It was my personality in general, that hysterical woman inside my head. My negativity was as destructive to me as the alcohol is to the alcoholic. I was an artist at finding my own jugular. It was as though I was addicted to my own pain. Could I ask God to help me with that? It occurred to me that just as with any other addictive behavior, maybe a power greater than myself could turn things around. Neither my intellect nor my willpower had been able to do that. Understanding what occurred when I was 3 years old hadn't been enough to free me. Problems I kept thinking would eventually go away kept getting worse every year. I hadn't emotionally developed the way I should have. And I knew it somehow. And I knew it somehow, somewhere. It was as though wires deep inside my brain had gotten crossed. Like a lot of other people in my generation and culture, I had gotten off track many years before, and in certain ways just never grew up. We've had the longest post-adolescence in the history of the world. Like emotional stroke victims, we need to go back a few steps in order to go forward. We need someone to teach us the basics. For me, no matter what hot water I had gotten into, I had always thought I could get myself out of it. I was cute enough or smart enough or talented enough or clever enough, and if nothing else worked, I could call my father and ask for money. But finally, I got myself into so much trouble that I knew I needed more help than I could muster up myself. At 12-step meetings, I kept hearing it said that a power greater than I could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. There was nothing else to do, and there was no one left to call. My fear finally became so great that I wasn't too hip to say, God, please help me. Boy, squeezed in a lot there, but it ended right on 9 o'clock. So if anyone has to hop off, feel free to do so. We'll just kind of have this final opportunity to share on what we read, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to jump right in on? Definitely some really good stuff there. Again, one of the reasons I was attracted to it is because Marianne talks a good amount about Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step meetings, and she's not an alcoholic, which I think is really awesome. And it just goes to show that the principles in those programs can really apply to anybody. And it's just so, I just love how she says it. You know, she says it wasn't really drinking or drugs or one specific thing with her. It was really just her negativity about life that just kept getting her into jams and into misery. And she got so sick of it that she finally kind of had this point where she puts her hands up and surrenders and just says, like, you know, God help me. Like, I'm willing to see this differently. Like, just this big surrendering moment that typically comes from most people when they hit a bottom. They finally hit this point of surrender. And when you're in that state, typically you become open to seeing things in a different light. So again, I'll just share one more part that I really liked a lot, and I'll see if anyone else wants to jump in, but I liked how, and I can relate to this, she talks about sort of these like short breakthrough moments. And that was, I had a lot of times where I tried to get sober, and even with other things in life where I would get really, I would get really into the gym and I would get into good shape, and like everyone would kind of think I was doing well. But then it was like everything would fall off, you know what I mean? Or maybe I would meet somebody or meet a group of friends or meet a girl, and everything looked like it was going well. But these kind of things were just sort of like patches. They weren't really, the real solution to my problem, which Kathy touched on before, was this emptiness that I felt within, this I am not good enough feeling. And so no amount of, push-ups or making out or money is going to make that go away. And that's what she's getting at, is that maybe sometimes we get this willingness or this strength to go to the gym or to do these things, but really there's a much deeper neuroses or problem going on. I think that's all I'm going to share. Anyone want to share anything before we wrap up? I think I see Sue's hand up. Impressive. Go ahead, Sue.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, perfect. So that last part, and I don't have a book in front of me, but talked about surrendering. And I just remember when I had my niece at my house, recovering from heroin, right? So she was going to therapy, and I was thinking I was doing the right thing, and she was supposed to get tested every day, but she was very resourceful and was able to kind of like skirt the system. So I was trying to be my best. I was trusting her, going to events like barbecues or something with the other folks, right? And putting trust in her. However, I learned to surrender, and once she started using, and I'd have conversations with her when she'd get home and she started like nodding off. So I started like hearing things like that. And she'd tell me, hey, Aunt Sue, you can't learn this stuff from Google. So stop Googling, right? So I'm like, all right, she was right about that. But I guess it got to the point where she was just lying and I wanted to trust her so bad. And I didn't realize that she had this problem until like 30 days beforehand, right? That, and it was so severe that I actually started praying to God. And I used to go to St. Catherine's there in Ben Salem all the time. And my brother still goes there every day to pray. Because at some point I feel that we have to surrender to God, because I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't argue with her. I couldn't make her respect me. I couldn't make her change. I couldn't, I want to say, outsmart her, you know, because she'd go and she'd get the syringes and they'd be in her purse and things like that. I couldn't keep up with that, so I had to surrender to God and just say, hey, just intervene and do something. And that's where she hit her lowest point. So thank God she's been sober over 3 years, I guess, already. So
Awesome.
this shows the power of surrendering.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? All right, let me unmute you, Aaron. All right.
Yes, that hit me pretty hard. Those couple pages there, especially, part where it says only one despair worse than God, I blew it again, and that's God, or and God, I blew it is God, I blew it again.
Yeah.
That's where I've been like the past 20 years of my life, and that's where I'm at like right now. There's been moments where I've had a little bit of hope, and then it's like right back to the hopelessness again. I'm glad I hopped on this meeting tonight, because that's where I've always lacked in the past before, is spirituality, and surrendering my will. And this was a real good group, man. I'm glad I joined it. I appreciate it, Joe. That's all I got.
Thanks, Aaron, man. It's awesome that you're here, dude. Thanks for sharing. I'm just gonna end one last thing. Share the screen. So where is it at? My painful thoughts. So I thought this was interesting how she kind of talks about how her painful thoughts are her demons and that they're insidious, and how she became very smart about her neuroses. And I kind of became that way. And so basically what she's saying is she's almost like aware of her sickness or her demons or her defects. And so she can talk a really good game. And anyone who's been in rehab or who knows me, you probably have seen that. And so you'll get these people in treatment, and I've done this, where you know yourself so well and you kind of know your defects or your crap. And so when like you go to therapy, you're really good at kind of smooth talking your way and saying exactly what they want to hear because you're aware of it. But it's basically saying that awareness, it's a first step and it's a great one, but it's not enough, because you can be aware of the issue and continue to do it and live out the same patterns, right? So I thought definitely, I could relate to how she said that, of becoming very smart about her own neuroses, and that even though she was aware of it, it didn't make them go away. The garbage didn't go away. It just became more sophisticated. So it's kind of like your disease or your sickness or your demons can kind of become more tricky or more sophisticated, which is can be a freaky thought. So if you find yourself in that space where you feel like you have some awareness and you're not really sure what to do about it, we didn't get into the light yet and a whole lot of the solution, but kind of what she's hinting towards is that my mouse here on the bottom is that you can ask for a miracle. So whether you believe in, a higher power or God or source or universe, nature, whatever you want to call it, someone who's passed away, angels, if you're in a bad spot, you kind of have the awareness of maybe some of your shortcomings or defects or whatever you want to call it. You can just kind of say, hey, God, I invite you in for a miracle. I invite you in to show me a different perception. I invite you in to show me, a shift in perception. And again, you can say it however you want to, but just the idea of kind of like Aaron said, and a few people have touched on this idea of surrendering and just kind of inviting and asking in another possibility can be really powerful. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there. Anyone have anything they're dying to say?
me, because I always talk a lot.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that was a really good point, Joe, about the neurosis and how maybe, you know, in a way, the way that I interpret it, it could be like that could in and of itself become an addiction, right? Like where we think we know ourselves so well and that we've like done everything that we can do, you know, to better ourselves. So we've convinced ourselves that we're doing the right thing. So I would just say that there comes times in life from my experience where I just take like a step back and pause and just ask for others' opinions and what do they see in me? Because maybe they can see what I can't see.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, that's awesome. Very good. Nan, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say a little aside that, you know, I'm right with Marianne Williamson on the idea of the 12-step program. And I can realize when she was ready to surrender and she found something in the program, it's unfortunate that a person has to have a problem in his or her life and get to the point where you consciously are surrendering and entering the program. But having attended meetings with you, Joe, you saw how fast I jumped on your big book meeting.
Yeah.
Because I feel sorry for people who will never know about the 12-step program, because it is, you know, so enlightening and so opening the door to who you are and how you think. But it's unfortunate that, first of all, everybody couldn't just do it. You have to be to a point where you're ready to get to that point. But it is unfortunate that more people don't get a chance to examine their own thoughts and their own attitudes and life in general, like you do with the 12-step program.
Totally agree. You're a wise lady. All right, cool. So we'll wrap up. There's no cost to be here, but I am taking donations if you enjoyed yourself and got something out of it and you feel inspired to donate. So I've just put in the chat, there's a link for PayPal and Venmo, or if you know you're not able to get to the chat now and you feel inspired to donate, you can message me. But again, there's no cost to be here. It's free of charge. So we'll just kind of wrap up with a prayer. So go ahead and close your eyes. And so just one final thought that I want to share is that it's, as I said before, it can be easy to get caught up on thinking that fear is entirely bad, and that's not what she's trying to say. And likewise, it can be easy to think that love is always this very soft, kind of appeasing, Mr. Nice guy or girl saying yes to everybody, and that's not at all what love is. So sometimes love looks like no. Sometimes love looks like asking someone to leave your home. So just don't be fooled into thinking that love is, again, this kind of softy, mushy, which of course it is that. Of course love is, you know, baby Noah giving Michelle a hug and a kiss when he felt something was off. That's amazing love. But again, love, just like fear, can come in different forms. And so really tuning into, you know, your heart and your higher self and, you know, doing what you feel is the best expression of love in each moment. So again, we'll just close our eyes. Dear God, dear source, dear universe, thank you for bringing us together here tonight. We know that whoever was in this room was exactly where they're supposed to be. Thank you again for bringing us here together and for showing us the way and connecting us and reminding us of the love that we all have within. And if you'd like, together we can all close by saying amen. So amen. Right on. So I'll unmute you guys. You can feel free to head out. If anyone has any questions, I'll kind of just keep it open for a minute. But planning to do this for the month of April. So we'll be back next Tuesday, 8 o'clock. You guys here, if you have any feedback or questions, comments, we'd love to hear from you. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's good to see y'all.
Thank you, Joe.
Joey.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Good job, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Connor.
I'll see you Friday, buddy. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. Cool.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for
Nice
coming.
seeing
on.
everybody.
See you.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it, Nan. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
See you Friday, Joe. Good stuff.
Thanks, Aaron. See you, dude.
What are you doing?
Leave meeting on the
Yeah.
top left.
Yeah.
Yo, it's just us. How you doing?
What up, bro? Good. You hopped on. You followed through.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
shit. You look like you got a haircut. I was expecting a
I
mop.
did. No, I cut it off like a week ago.
No shit. Somebody cut it or you
Yeah.
did?
Someone else cut it.
Got you. How was your
Too
meeting?
short, but it was alright. It was cold because it's cold out, but
Got you. There's in-person meetings happening? Where the hell is that at? You making that up?
it was in someone's backyard.
Ah,
Exclusive,
nice.
exclusive joint.
That's what's up.
Yeah, yeah.
How you doing, man? You in some steps right now or anything or no?
I have a sponsor, but he's not like rushing me through them or anything.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what his deal is.
Got you. Does he seem like he knows what he's talking about or hard to tell?
I don't know. I know before he was my sponsor. He's not. He knows what he's talking